Here's a little known tidbit that may or may not interest you. I'm reading this voiceover from a Google Doc in the text preset color Dark Yellow Number 3 because it's a pretty close match to Iridescent Antique Gold, one of 3 Daniel Smith shades from their Luminescent series of watercolors. Hi, I'm Irene, and if your mind just exploded upon learning that I plan out this stuff, what can I say? The gift of the gab is not one of my talents. Hey, it may take a while to get my thoughts organized, but I've got things to say, and you're all my captive audience. These are intriguing items after all, and honestly, I haven't seen that many people demonstrating them. I already have Kuratake's Starry Colors set of Gonzai Tombi paints. It consists of 6 shimmery gold-like colors, so I didn't feel a need to have these Daniel Smith ones. But producer Mike is great about acquiring interesting things to show on this channel. I should probably explain that I don't often use specialty colors like these, but I did use one of them, the Iridescent Antique Gold, on a recent painting. I'll include a link to that video in the description. Meanwhile, here are a few glamour shots of that project. While the effect was subtle, I felt it enhanced the piece enough to make it worth that extra step. I expect this shimmery sort of paint would work well on dark paper, but while I have some toned sketch paper, I don't have toned watercolor paper. So what are the sort of applications I would use these for? Probably glazing, meaning I would apply them over other colors. That way you have the shimmery effect over an existing layer. Since I'm not very familiar with specialty paints, I should practice with that. In fact, a kind viewer who had sent me several Daniel Smith luminescent paints in the past actually recommended mixing them with other colors. An exercise for another day. For now, I just couldn't wait any longer to share this simple swatching session. Along with antique gold, there's bronze and Aztec gold to round out this trio. But these aren't the only colors in this subcategory. All in all, there looks to be 20 shades under the iridescent label, which are inspired by both metals and gemstones. Interference, duochrome, and pearlescent are the other subcategories under the larger luminescent umbrella. They appear to be made up of white pigments, micas, and iron oxides. Even Kuretake has their gem, pearl, and opal sets, which seem very similar. But if I recall correctly, I don't think Kuretake includes pigment information. So while Daniel Smith rates all of their luminescent watercolors with excellent light fastness, take that with a grain of salt, by the way, Kuretake's light fastness might be in question. For my purposes, it's not a big deal, and I'd rather spend $12 to $15 on one of Kuretake's fun 6-color sets rather than on one tube of Daniel Smith, at least when it comes to these luminescent paints that, admittedly, I just don't use much. Lest it sounds as if I'm poo-pooing on the Shimmer parade, I'll point out some ways I enjoy iridescence. Dragonfly wings, hummingbird feathers, abalone shells, certain sheening inks, and soap bubbles. But back to gold. In my younger years, one of my favorite songs was Midas Man. It was from the 1977 album Novella by the British progressive rock band Renaissance. Their use of classical, folk, and jazz styles made them a unique listening experience. Novella, in particular, sounded like a fairy tale, and I played it repeatedly while studying the fantasy-like cover art. It was a single LP, but the jacket opened like a book, so there was plenty to look at, including band member portraits and each song's lyrics. The LP is long gone, but to this day, I can't hear the music without bracing myself for that familiar needle skip smack dab in the middle of Midas Man. The story of King Midas comes from Greek mythology. Short version, one of the gods granted Midas's wish to be able to turn everything he touched into gold, which he regretted after accidentally goldifying his food and drink, and even his own child. One thing that made Renaissance so memorable was their lead vocalist, Annie Haslam. In fact, one of the first CDs I ever purchased was her eponymous solo album from 1989. It had several lovely cover versions of songs like Mike Oldfield's Moonlight Shadow, Agneta's The Angel's Cry, and Rose Royce's Wishing on a Star. Unfortunately, much of the album is marred by a touch of late 1980s cheese and bland jazzness. Hey, I just made up a word. Yes, I got derailed there, but you've got to admit, duochrome, interference, iridescence, luminescence, pearlescence, it's all a lot to keep track of. Sure, they look pretty and all, but maybe I'm not prepared to dive down the shimmer and sheen rabbit hole. And anything that makes me have to pull out the Daniel Smith brochure is bound to aggravate me, 'cause they've got way too many colors. This is mainly just me being crotchety, because I'm actually looking forward to using these iridescent paints in conjunction with Kuratake's latest colors, the Art Nouveau set, if it ever gets restocked, that is. That's right, producer Mike has been trying to get it for me, but it's been sold out everywhere. As a fan of the Art Nouveau style, I was thrilled when the new Kuretake set was announced, and I want to recreate one of Alphonse Mucha's works. I do have a hand-me-down set of Kuretake's original colors, and they are really fun to use. Gansai paints are Japanese watercolors, but I understand they include ingredients such as animal glue, beeswax, sugar, and glycerin. This makes them a little different from other types of watercolors. I'm happy to share this simple swatching session. I talked a lot about luminescence and iridescence, and it might have been confusing. To clarify, the majority of Daniel Smith's watercolors are in their extra fine category. Then there are a bunch of colors in their luminescent category. That includes the subcategories: iridescent, interference, duochrome, and pearlescent. There's a whole nother category called Primatech, but that's a rocky subject, so don't get me started on that one. Until next time, be shiny, happy people, and stay artsy, my friends.